Good morning, everyone. Welcome, committee members and to witnesses today. As everyone knows, we're here today to deal with the Supplementary Estimates B for 2014-15. Vote 1B under Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. Vote 1B under the National Energy Board. Votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under Natural Resources. These were referred to the committee on Wednesday, November 5th, 2014. And we have with us today on our first panel of witnesses, the Honourable Greg Rickford, Minister of Natural Resources. Welcome to you, sir. And thank you for coming, by the way, on such short notice. The committee appreciates it very much. And we have with the Minister today from the Department of Natural Resources, Bob Hamilton, Deputy Minister, and welcome to you, sir, as well. We have the Minister here for the first hour today, and then we go to departmental officials for the second hour. I would encourage members to keep their questions focused on the Supplementary Estimates B. So with that, we'll go ahead, Minister, go ahead with your opening statement, and then we'll go directly to questions and comments by members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all members of the committee for this opportunity. Perhaps, if I may, just say a few words to set the context for some more specific details around the supplementary estimates and questions that you may have here today. I think we all understand the importance of natural resources and their industries, and that they account for 20% of Canada's GDP. Natural resources in Canada are the source of more than 2 million jobs across the country, and notably are the largest employer of First Nations. Resource development also acts as a vital driver for growth of our economy overall, whether this is in manufacturing, transportation, and or in particular with energy needed to power our industries. Le développement des ressources aide les communautés à...
Resource development helps communities thrive, contributing to social programs, education, and public infrastructure, and enhancing our quality of life. Mr. Chair, there are certain things that we need to do to ensure communities and all of Canada continue to thrive from natural resource development.
Three particular areas that have been the focus of some of my more recent activities. First, the changing global demand issues, challenges, and opportunities around market diversification and access of our resources. On a global scale, we're told that by 2035, the world will need a third more energy than is being consumed today. Almost all of the increase in demand will come from non-OECD countries. This is not just for energy. There's a soaring demand for our minerals and the manufacturing that they make possible. Think of it this way. In China alone, by 2025, China will need 5 million new buildings, including 30,000 new skyscrapers. Or India, where fully 80% of the infrastructure it will need by 2030 has not even been built yet. For Canada, colleagues, this shift and potential demand from Canada offers an exciting new possibility to provide energy and resources that will drive growth and improve the quality of life of millions of people around the globe, as well as contribute to international stability. As recent events in Europe have made evident, energy security has become a tool for exercising foreign policy, making energy security a matter of national, continental, and global security. And as countries in Europe and elsewhere seek to diversify both the types of energy they use and the suppliers of that energy, Canada, we believe, is well positioned, reliable, secure, and responsible. Canada is facing a golden opportunity, perhaps once in a generation, as some have framed it, to diversify our markets in the resource sector. In the case of energy alone, this is now a strategic imperative, as the United States, virtually our only customer for oil and gas, produces more and more of its own fuels. As America unlocks its shale and tight oil formations, it's transforming its energy relationship with Canada and the world. So the implications could not be clearer for Canada. Market diversification and market access and product diversification are imperatives. If we miss this opportunity, particularly over the medium term, that is, the development of these resources and the infrastructure required to support their transportation, we will be missing out on an excellent opportunity for this country. Let me talk about the second piece then, environmental performance. Notre gouvernement est conscient que
While our government sees the imperative to act, and act quickly, we are committed to ensuring that our resources are developed in a responsible manner. The fact is, our bottom line is simple. In Canada, no project proceeds unless and until a thorough and independent review demonstrates it to be safe for the public and for the environment. Over the past year, we have stepped up our game, redoubled our efforts with new measures to enhance our world-class pipelines and marine safety systems, world-quality ones.
tout aussi important, notre gouvernement a pris des mesures concrètes pour assurer la participation des collectivités autochtones.
Equally important, our government has taken concrete action to engage Aboriginal communities in all aspects of resource development. This includes establishing our Major Projects Management Office West and the Tripartite Energy Forum as part of our continuing response to the report by Mr. Douglas Eiford, the Special Federal Representative for the West Coast Energy Infrastructure.
Supplementary estimates B specifically. Mr. Chair, let me now provide you with a brief overview of my department's supplementary estimates. These estimates bring the total budgetary authorities for NRCan in the current fiscal year to just under $2.81 billion. When including the main estimates, the supplementary estimates A, the supplementary estimates B, and direct transfers. This is an overall proposed net increase of just under $35 million in Natural Resources Canada's total budgetary resources in 2014-15. Increases to the supplementary estimates B include $18.8 million to support our work in defining the limits of Canada's continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean, including the North Pole, which will help inform Canada's submission to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. This is a priority under the Northern Strategy and the Statement on Arctic Foreign Policy. Also related to the Northern Strategy is a transfer of $2.1 million from National Defence to Natural Resources. This is for the ongoing operation and maintenance of NRCan's Resolute facility and related logistical support for the Canadian Forces Arctic Training Centre. A transfer of $1.7 million from Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development will enable my department to deliver cost-effective, safe, and efficient field logistics for the Canadian High Arctic Research Station Science and Technology Program. Le comité remarquera que des fonds supplémentaires de 2,5 millions.
The committee will note that these estimates include a further $2.5 million to facilitate Aboriginal participation in West Coast energy development, a direct response to the report prepared by Mr. Eiford. Also included in the estimates is $7.6 million for the renewal of the Investments in Forest Industry Transformation Program. This program supports the development and commercialization of technologies that will enable Canada's forest industry to develop a more diversified and higher value mix of products. This is crucial to the forest sector's global competitiveness, as is the $1.5 million for genomics research and development initiative. This funding supports research that is directed towards improving forest health and supporting Canada's forest industry. Also, the funds, the estimates include $6.5 million for National Energy Board. This primarily relates to the reviews of the Trans-Canada Pipelines Energy East and the Imperial Deepwater Offshore Well Mega Project applications, as well as funding for the increased public awareness of pipeline safety. What's more, Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, AECL, is completing the discharge of its liabilities related to AECL's former commercial division, which were divested in 2011. To this effect, Supplementary Estimates B includes $35 million for a payment made by AECL to Bruce Power relating to the now completed refurbishment of 2 nuclear power reactors in Ontario.
These targeted, fiscally responsible investments support our government's ongoing commitment to enabling Canada's natural resource sector to deliver the benefits that are of such fundamental importance to Canadians, and to do so in a way that is safe, socially and environmentally responsible, and that respects our constitutional and constitutional obligations and opportunities for Aboriginal people. Merci encore une fois pour cette occasion.
Thank you again for the opportunity to meet with the committee, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Much, Minister, for your presentation. Very helpful information for the committee. We go now to the 7-minute round, starting with Ms. Block, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister, followed by Ms. Charlton from the Official Opposition and Mr. Regan from the Liberal Party. So if you go ahead, Ms. Block, up to 7 minutes.
I wonder if I could ask.
Point of order, Ms. Charlton.
I just wonder if the Parliamentary Secretary and the Minister might just want to have this conversation in his office, and whether the Parliamentary Secretary would give us her 7 minutes.
I don't think that was really a point of order. Mischievous, in fact, I would suggest. Ms. Block, go ahead, please.
I just want to give my colleague an E for effort. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I welcome you, Minister Rickford, as well as Deputy Minister Hamilton, to this meeting. We look forward to being able to discuss with you our supplementary estimates. And I do want to thank you both for the excellent leadership that you are providing to our nation in the responsible development of our natural resources, and pass through you to the department as well how much we appreciate the excellent work that they are doing on behalf of our country. As you well know, the natural resources sector is the largest private employer of First Nations people in Canada. That's not news to you, sir. And in reviewing these estimates, I note that 2.5 million vote 1 under operating in the supplementary estimates B is for Aboriginal participation in West Coast energy development. And I'm wondering if you could just provide us with further detail on how these funds will further enable First Nations to make important contributions as full partners in the development of our natural resources.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to the committee about what I believe represents an exciting opportunity. The announcement and subsequent opening of the Major Project Management Office West in Vancouver is a clear signal of what the federal government intends to do in terms of engaging with British Columbia First Nations. This is intended, colleagues, to be a single window to coordinate extensive engagement with First Nations and actually of industry. I want to emphasize that this will be focused on enabling First Nations communities to take advantage of the business opportunities, the increasing employment opportunities through training and skills development, and working to enhance environmental safety. The government's supplementary estimates include funding to support this engagements with First Nations in British Columbia, specifically in order to understand the key issues and opportunities, I might add, to support their participation in resource, more specifically energy-related projects.
Thank you very much. I also note on the same page of the estimates 264, further down, there's a line item, and it's in regards to authorities to support comprehensive claims and self-government negotiations in British Columbia. And we know that modern treaties are the most comprehensive way of addressing Aboriginal rights and title. They resolve questions of uncertainty with respect to ownership or use of land and resources, and also provide First Nations with the economic and social tools to promote self-reliant communities and the capacity to identify and implement their own solutions to difficult economic and social problems. All in all, modern treaties are I think, good for all Canadians. A line item in the estimates that I've already highlighted is the authorities to support the comprehensive claims and self-government negotiations. How does this item contribute to these benefits?
Well, look, we're proud to be a part of this process because I think negotiated treaties will provide the certainty that British Columbia needs. There are obviously, with things like liquefied natural gas opportunities, a chance to create a strong economic base for First Nations in full partnership with industry and other levels of government. So this item indicates that funding is to provide technical and professional expertise and services to the regional claims and treaty negotiators in British Columbia, renewed for an additional 2 years. These include services for legal surveys, land management, land tenure regimes, as well as forest management and assessment. Importantly, there are also tools for the support of other processes that may go on in the instance of resource development, cultural mapping, traditional land use planning, to name a few. So the renewed funds and the authorities that allow NRCan to continue supporting the negotiation of comprehensive land claim agreements, including self-government agreements in British Columbia for the period of April 1st, 2014 to March 31st, 2016. This funding was, of course, introduced under our government in 2008 to 2009. I would say, finally, that modern treaty negotiations flow from the agreement of Canada, British Columbia, and First Nations to establish that new relationship based on trust, mutual respect, and understanding, and then for the purposes of natural resources to support a process where First Nations have the opportunity to become involved in all aspects of responsible resource development.
A minute and a half. Okay.
I can go on if.
Perhaps we know, Minister, that you've had different experiences working with First Nations in previous professions that you've served in, and also you're very aware of the AFERD report that was brought forward. And if you would speak to perhaps how some of these initiatives flow out of the AFERD report.
Well, much of the focus in my own professional experience and now in my political capacities have been to focus on the contributions, the capacity of First Nations to participate, particularly in the environmental assessment processes, the National Energy Board and joint review panels. I have seen firsthand as a nurse living up in the North British Columbia coast and in my own district with Webequie First Nations, the incredible contributions that they can make to these processes, which importantly and should preempt any plans for resource development. And as I said earlier, whether it's cultural mapping, traditional land use planning, marine safety, it's my view and it's my experience that they have significant contributions to make any of these processes, any of these exercises, and the opportunity itself safer, more environmentally responsible. And I think that level of engagement and integration is really a proxy for the success of, ultimately, of any given project.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Block. We go now to Ms. Charlton, up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Minister, for spending some time with us this morning. I Wow, 7 minutes really isn't enough to explore everything we'd like to chat to you about, but hopefully you'll come back sometime soon. Let me begin by focusing on some of the comments that you made about both community engagement and the NEB. As you know, a lot of Canadians, especially in recent months, have been concerned about the fact that there are not a lot of forums left for citizens to express their opinions and their concerns about some of the energy projects in our country. And I would, just for recent reference, you may want to think about the folks that are currently protesting on Burnaby Mountain with respect to Kinder Morgan. I guess my first question to you would be, first of all, do you agree with your predecessor that folks who are engaging in the process in this way are radicals?
Well, what I would say, Mr. Chair, is that I think the expectation of the general public, and certainly that of our government, is for peaceful protest. I respect and understand that. It has become part of the process of certain projects, and often more. Otherwise, that's a matter for local officials, I think, to deal with.
I think people do want to participate in the process. They do want to do that peacefully, and they've been searching for opportunities to give that informed and significant voice to concerns that they have. I think recent acts to the NEB Act, though, have made that increasingly difficult for them. And so we're seeing increasing unrest, and as you know, there are ongoing legal battles around both Kinder Morgan and around Northern Gateway. And so I wonder, would you agree that perhaps the process isn't delivering the kind of predictability and certainty that Canadians need and deserve? And have you thought at all about reversing those changes to the NEB process?
Well, I don't think that we would want, respectfully, Mr. Chair, I don't think we would want to reverse changes that have given the National Energy Board broader powers of enforcement and investigation. Those are as substantive as anything. And understanding that the National Energy Board is committed and focused on safety information to Canadians, in particular with respect to compliance and enforcement actions. The NEB's increase in funding is primarily due to its review of TransCanada's Energy East and as well the Imperial Deepwater offshore well applications. As my colleague might know, Mr. Chair, the NEB's funding is cost recovered from the energy industry. But I can tell you, and this is a message that I have been sending consistently to folks, the federal government understands clearly its role and the need for an independent, science and fact-based review process that accommodates for people who are most directly impacted by a given project and any and all technical expertise that's science and fact-based to that particular project. I would conclude, Mr. Chair, by saying that the federal government regulates 73,000 kilometers of pipelines here in Canada, and we have a 99.999% safety record. I think that's worth sharing with folks in the debate about, in particular, any specific pipeline project, but pipelines in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I just want to follow up on changes to the NEB. I mean, you talk about the science-based decision-making, but the reality is your government has also deliberately and systematically eliminated the opportunity for public participation. You talked in your presentation here just moments ago about the need for community engagement, and yet up in Burnaby Mountain, the First Nations have been quite clear that they have not been consulted. So I think there are changes to the NEB Act and the process that people are hungering for, and I think we could expand assessment criteria to include things like better consultation. We could, of course, also include things like greenhouse gas emissions, jobs, national and regional energy security, and, as I mentioned earlier, respecting our obligations to First Nations. So I'd ask you again, specifically on the public consultation side, would you not agree that we can and must do better, and that Canadians are in fact telling you that this very moment on Burnaby Mountain?
Look, the National Energy Board obviously I'm seized of in the portfolio of Natural Resources Canada, and it is a robust and independent regulatory body that, in our view, conducts a rigorous science and fact-based review of projects. I, in fairness, Mr. Chair, suspect that there will always be a difference of opinions on how much time and the scope of engagement. I think consistently the National Energy Board has more than adequately provided for that. Thousands of inputs. There are several different fora for which this can come into the National Energy Board, written, viva voce, and the likes. So I think that there's that opportunity exists. And I think that the National Energy Board has to hear from those most directly affected by a given project, and of course those with relevant expertise on the matter. For our part, then, in interpreting those decisions, we've been clear. Projects will only proceed if they're safe for Canadians and safe for the environment. And I think we've demonstrated, Mr. Chair, a commitment to that in decisions I'm sure this member doesn't want to raise, where we've made difficult decisions in British Columbia around certain projects. But
let me just follow up with one
Sure.
more minor question. You mentioned in your presentation that there is money for Aboriginal consultation for West Coast energy development. Is it only on the West Coast? What are your plans in the rest of the country?
Well, certainly the major project management, good question. The major project management office West is focused on British Columbia. Certainly, with respect to any other major project, the National Energy Board, as we identified in the supplementary estimates, the National Energy Board will have a more expansive review process, and so there will be opportunities there for First Nations, and since that has just been submitted to the National Energy Board, I can't really comment on those specific plans, but there are, whether it's our Pipeline Safety Act in particular, which will be forthcoming, we're focused on ensuring that First Nations have a substantive and ample opportunity to participate in safety, prevention, preparedness, and the response elements of that legislative framework. And
thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Charlton. Mr. Regan, up to 7 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Viva voce. Sounding more like a lawyer than a nurse, Mr. Minister. Let me ask you about the $35 million being paid to AECL so it can transfer it on to Bruce Power. What's that for?
Right. So the AECL line, just let me refer to the specific supplementary estimate line here. The $35 million payment, Mr. Chair, was made by the AECL to Bruce Power as part of a negotiated contractual settlement of a contractual and legal issues with respect to the now completed refurbishment of the 2 nuclear plants, reactors in Ontario. The details of it are confidential, but these estimates also include a transfer of $285,000 from National Defence to AECL's role in the Canadian Safety and Security Program. It's a federally funded science and technology program aimed to strengthen Canada's ability to address natural disasters, serious accidents, crime, and terrorism.
So $35 million, but it's confidential, so we can't really know what that's about. I guess I'm not going to pursue that further because obviously there's no point in doing so.
I would say that it would be confidential as between those parties, for sure.
What has been the total to date? What are the total costs associated so far with selling off the CANDU assets and SNC Lavalin? Do you anticipate additional costs, and if so, how much and for what?
We'll have to get back. I don't have this.
get back to
I don't have the precise figures in front of me, so we'll be happy to follow up with the response.
Thank you, Minister. Can you tell us how much is budgeted for the creation of the Canadian nuclear laboratories and for the transfer of CNL to the private sector? Is there a final figure at this stage, for example?
So you're talking about the NRU in particular, or the...
Well, you have to create the Canadian nuclear laboratories.
Right.
That whole entity has to be created. There must be money budgeted for that, I would think, to do that. And then there must be costs associated with the transfer of CNL to the private sector.
So I gave those first figures in your rapid-fire approach here, which I very much appreciate, on the National Research Universal Reactor and medical isotopes. We're taking action here to ensure security and diversity of supply by investing more than $60 million in alternative technologies to diversify sources of supply. This would come through the Isotope Technology Acceleration Program. I think it's ITAP is its acronym. Investing in 3 projects led by innovative Canadian organizations. We're also active in internationally encouraging a better coordination of world supply and the efficient use of medical isotopes, which is often the biggest concern in this discussion. I would note then that before 2010, the NRU produced more than 40% of the global supply. And today, those supplies are between 15 to 20%.
Mister, I'm not sure I'm getting what I'm looking for here, which is what's budgeted for the creation of CNL, basically, and what are the costs of transferring it?
I'm happy to provide those specific, particular figures to you. The answer, of course, deals with the transition that is going on, particularly at that facility, and I think it represents a great opportunity for Canada's nuclear industry.
How much? This brings the ACL funding to $332 million, the additional $35 million. How much of that is for the operation of the NRU?
So for the operation of the NRU,
You don't have those. Do you want me to?
well,
Part of subspeed.
I appreciate the questions. They don't form part of supplementary estimates B, but we'll be happy to provide the questions that you've asked that are outside of supplementary estimate Bs in terms of specific figures.
I appreciate that, Mr. Minister. I think your opening comments
review.
certainly arranged a bit broader than just the supplementary Bs. Let me ask you, have you budgeted any funds for the operation of the NRU beyond 2016?
Thank you for that question. As I mentioned to you earlier, we are focused on the transformation of that facility to a GOCO, and obviously there is a process taking place there that is focused on, in particular, being licensed to operate until 2016. No decisions have been made beyond that time.
So you have no number in terms of what you haven't budgeted anything for any operation beyond that. Is what you're trying to say?
The NRU is currently licensed to operate until 2016, and no decisions have been made to beyond that time.
What are the expected shutdown costs of the NRU, and how much has already been spent on preparatory work for that shutdown?
Well, again, we would be happy to provide those figures to you, since they lie outside of the specific supplementary estimates, which I don't believe at any point in time in my comments earlier I expounded on it, at risk of these questions around nuclear energy external to the supplementary estimates.
Well, you did certainly talk about medical isotopes, so let me ask you what work has been done to determine the impact on global supply of medical isotopes when the NRU shuts down, because that's been a matter of great concern for the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine, who've warned that shutting it down will put the supply of medical isotopes internationally in serious danger, and that alternatives may not be available. In fact, the Nuclear Medical Association states, and I quote, "The potential doomsday scenario of simultaneous closures, shutdown, maintenance of the NRU and other reactors in Europe or elsewhere in the following 2 to 4 years could be postponed or canceled if the NRU is allowed to operate for a few more years," unquote.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are myriad quotes on this, and of course Mr. Chair, this committee would have been seized of a number of issues over the course of the past 2 decades with respect to medical isotope production and what occurred or didn't occur at that facility over the course of those 2 decades. I'm sure that the member knows that the state of the science, technology, and policy positions of both nuclear organizations around the world and countries is to move away from highly enriched uranium as the source for medical isotopes. And that's why Canada has responded in earnest, focused on isotope technology acceleration programs, not just a more nimble but ultimately safer way of producing medical isotopes for important health diagnostic capacities and the opportunities that they present for domestic and international markets. I can say that bilaterally, with the United States alone, and other countries' positions as well, support alternative ways to produce medical isotopes. And that said, Mr. Chair, this government is very cognizant of the importance of medical isotopes to diagnostic capacity here in Canada and abroad, is invested in acceleration programs and appreciates the ongoing, however markedly reduced, contribution of the NRU to those specific kinds of isotopes, but will continue to protect them as a source as new alternatives are nearly ripe for full-time production.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Regan. We go to the 5-minute round now. There will be 4 questioners in the 5-minute round, starting with Mr. Leaf, then Mr. Lauzon, then Ms. Duncan, and Mr. Trost. So go ahead, please, Mr. Leaf, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, welcome to our committee. It's great to have you here. I'm hoping that you're going to be able to expand a little bit on a section of your opening remarks. You talked about the increase in the supplementary estimates B that include $18.8 million to support our work in defining the limits of Canada's continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean, including the North Pole. I'm just wondering if you can highlight the importance of this work for Canada and maybe expand or tell us a little bit more about this year's survey.
So, a good question. Obtaining international recognition for the full extent of our continental shelf is a priority for the Government of Canada. It's a fundamental effort and, importantly, a legacy for future Canadians. This international recognition is vital to future resource development. So in December 2013, we filed a partial submission with the Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf to define the outer limits of the continental shelf in the Atlantic Ocean, and at the same time Canada filed a preliminary information concerning its continental shelf in the Arctic Ocean, which are issues that you have shown tremendous leadership on. The 2014 survey, more precisely that you're talking about, for Eastern Arctic was completed in September using the CCGS Louis Saint Laurent and the CCGS Terry Fox. Surveys that were conducted in the vicinity of the North Pole and the Lomonosov Ridge. In excess of 12,000 kilometers of bathymetric data were acquired and 746 kilometers of seismic reflection data was produced. And I can tell you that preparations for the next survey are underway.
That's excellent news. Thank you. And I see you've also indicated that there's, in the supplementary estimates B, there's an increase coming to the Department from Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada over to natural resources to enable the delivery of the Canadian High Arctic Research Station and Technology Program. And I can tell you just from being on the ground in Cambridge Bay this year on the Northern Tour, the community is exceptionally excited about that. It's a great news announcement for the North, and we're very much looking forward to seeing the results of that. And I guess I congratulate you for being able to pull some money away from Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development in Canada into natural resources for this particular program. Can you maybe highlight what these funds are going to be specifically be used for, and how the department's going to ensure that they're going to be employed in a cost-effective manner?
Sure. Tough but fair, precise questions on the supplementary estimates. Let me just talk about Natural Resource Canada's Polar Continental Shelf Program. It's intended to provide the delivery of cost-effective, safe, and efficient field logistics for the Canadian High Arctic Research Station Science and Technology Program by NRCan, specifically our Polar Continental Shelf Program, PCSP. PCSP is the principal Canadian provider of terrestrial Arctic logistical support to academic and government researchers, and it's been in business, in fact, for more than 50 years, much longer than anybody sitting here at this committee today. Using PCSP eliminates the need for CHARS and S&T program or any other department or Arctic science program in its efforts to replicate field logistics capacity, including human resources and the need to commit large volume multi-year aircraft and fuel contracts by using one existing organization to deliver the logistics. Cost effectiveness and efficiencies can be gained, which benefit the Government of Canada as a whole, and obviously and most importantly, Arctic science. This, I would say, finally, Mr. Chair, is the first of a 5-year annual transfer commitment by Indian Affairs for the implementation phase of CHARS S&T program. The partnership ensures that CHARS clients have access to the lowest cost at the lowest cost to aircraft, to fuel and field equipment when and where needed, and that these are provided with the highest margin, of course, of safety possible.
Thank you, Mr. Leaf. We go now to Mr. Lauzon, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister. And I'm new to this committee, so some of the questions that I'll have might be rather naive, so you'll have to bear with me. I noticed in your comments, though, that you talked about $7.6 million for renewal of the Investments in Forest Industry Transformation Programs. And it's nice to know that that's acronym is IFIT. Just a very interesting acronym. And this program is to support the development and commercialization of technologies to have a higher value mix of products in the forest industry. So, being new to this committee, this intrigues me. How do we do that? How does IFIT give us a better product or a more diversified yield, if you will, or?
So, look, I could go on and on for this. I realize this is probably one of the most important investments we're making in the forest sector. For any of us who come from large, vast regions where the forest sector has been the lifeblood of our local economies. At the bottom of the last recession, there were a couple of notable observations that one could make. First of all, small mills couldn't and wouldn't survive, not just because of the recession, but because they tended to cut board foot or make a very raw form of pulp, for example. And because of their inability to diversify their product offering, they couldn't carve out anything else that was left, so to speak. So the IFIT program is focused on, and we've seen some great results already, accelerating the deployment of highly innovative, first-in-kind technologies at Canadian forest industry facilities. I can say that to date, the program has successfully funded 14 different projects involving 9 world-first technologies. 75% of projects creating new products or diversifying recipients' product offering. In the renewal of this program, the response from the proponents, from stakeholders, we call the innovative forestry transformation program. They just say it fits. It fits what forest sector is asking for right now, so that to the extent there are still in the context of a global, fragile global economy, forest sector, but specifically mills and the likes, have an opportunity to diversify their product offering. And this program finally has an entry point for all sizes of operations. So it's fair as well, and is focused on innovation for first-in-kind technologies.
Sounds like a pretty good return on investment.
So far.
Yeah, another thing, another line item that I noticed was the supplementary estimates was the Genomic Research and Development Initiative, and this is only $1.5 million. But apparently, according to the information I have, is that it leverages funds through collaboration with Canadian and international universities, research organizations, and particularly private companies, which really intrigues me. So you're leveraging that money, but how do we know that the money that we're spending relates to the kinds of things you just talked about, Minister, that we're getting the right product and the right results, that these private companies or these universities aren't going off on their own tangent? How do we know that we're really, they're buying into Canada's aim?
Well, in your previous question, we were talking about innovations and technologies for the industry. This particular line item is focused on the sustainability of those sources, the trees. This kind of research is directed towards improving forest health, in short, and supporting the industry by identifying and emphasizing the health of specific species that are of economic importance to the country. Some examples would be, for example, in Atlantic Canada, where the balsam fir sawfly has been a problem for decades. Funding from the Genomics Research Development Initiative has allowed NRCan to sequence the genome of a biological control virus to reduce the population of this very highly destructive insect. And Canada now has licensed this biologic control to a New Brunswick-based company for commercial use, actually, under the trade name Abiative. As well, there are other instances that arrive where forest pests become critically impactful on the health of a forest. And so the GRDI department's scientists actually work collaboratively on a Government of Canada priority targeting research on invasive and quarantine species to protect Canada's biodiversity and trade as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Lauzon. Thank you, Minister. Ms. Duncan, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Minister. Just to reiterate my colleague's comment, a lot of important questions to ask you on Sup-Bs, and hard to do in 17 minutes only allotted to the opposition. My first question is on the 2.5 million being dedicated to establish the MPMO office for Vancouver. Now, it's my understanding that office was created to streamline major energy projects. Last year, your department spent $21 million just to reestablish the Calgary NEB office. So can you tell us how much of that $2.5 million is being spent to establish the MPN office, and how much is actually going to genuinely engage First Nations in their determination of their energy priorities?
Thank you for that question. As I had said earlier, I believe in my remarks and in questions of likeness, this is focused MPMO on enabling First Nations to take advantage of the business opportunities, the increasing employment opportunities through training and skills development, and working to enhance environmental safety. It is, Mr. Chair, an exercise to integrate their full and important contributions on all aspects of any specific resource project. So as a practical first step, the MPMO office, which has only recently been opened, as I said earlier, will serve as a single window, a one-stop shop to coordinate the extensive engagement.
If I could just interject, Mr. Minister, my question is about allocation of money. This is about the SUP-Bs, and my question was very specific about the SUP-Bs. How much of that $2.5 million is actually being spent on establishing the office?
I can provide you with the specific amount as a portion of that money for, you're talking about the physical space or
it's a very specific
the human
question.
resources?
Sure.
I
So I have a second question for you.
Yes.
I've noticed in your budget that there is mention that the government is becoming more interested in investments in renewable power energy efficiency, as Canadians are asking. I noted I always follow the U.S.-Canada, U.S. Clean Energy Dialogue report. I noticed your officials attend a lot of seminars on energy efficiency. You may have noted the Northwest Territories have declared that they're going to shift away from fossil fuels to shifting towards use of renewable power. As most of the Northwest Territories is an Aboriginal population, I am wondering where can we find in the SUP-Bs a shift now towards more investment in energy efficiency and investment in expanding renewable power rather than fossil fuels?
Well, this is really about a clean energy agenda, and I'm actually very proud of the investments and the results that we're having, specifically with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions on a net basis. And of the fact that Canada has the lowest, the cleanest electricity mix in the G7, with more than 79% of it coming from non-emitting sources. Investments in green infrastructure, energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, and the production of cleaner energy and cleaner fuels are having an impact on our environment. We have obviously, one of the most successful programs or funds within natural resources, the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Fund, which is committed to energy and environmental innovation, and of course the eco-energy innovation, supporting energy research, development, and demonstration in projects in critical areas such as smart grids and renewables. Reducing the environmental impact of oil sands, energy efficiency for industry and communities, bioenergy, electrification of transportation, and an announcement I recently made in Estevan, Saskatchewan, in carbon capture and storage.
I'm not sure that carbon capture and storage fits in with renewable energy and energy efficiency, but I appreciate the response.
Very short question.
One
Ms.
final
Duncan.
quick question. I note that in the SUP-Bs we have $2.5 million for furthering the major energy projects, basically by major mining and oil companies in British Columbia and Alberta, but a much smaller amount for furthering finalization of self-government agreements of $200,000. Wouldn't it make more sense to put that $2.5 million into finalizing the self-government agreements in British Columbia, and then they could move forward and self-determine on their energy future?
Very short answer, please, Minister.
Well, look, this funding for NRCan's purposes is very focused. It's on technical and professional expertise and services to regional claims and treaty negotiators in British Columbia. And they include services specifically for legal surveys, land management, land tenure regimes, as well as forest management and assessments. These are also important building blocks for other processes, particularly environmental assessment processes, joint review panel, National Energy Board could and would find useful and fortify the participation of First Nations communities.
That's for the whole
and
country.
their positions in those.
200,000 for the
Order,
whole
Ms.
country.
Duncan. Order. Thank you very much, Minister. Final questioner, Mr. Trost. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here today. Mr. Luzon noted this was his first time here, and Mr. Luzon noted this is his first time here, and he's a bit of a rookie at this. I guess this is, my 9th year. I've seen some version of a Minister of Natural Resources. So I think you'll forgive me to some degree with this question. I've asked it before to previous ministers. And it comes from my background as exploration mining geophysicist. I'm probably the only member of Parliament, at least on this committee, who's actually done geological mapping. So I have a bit of a personal interest in the geomapping for energy and minerals program. So I was wondering, Mr. Minister, if you could give us a bit of an update and overview on the program. It's been going for a few years. Particularly talk about how it impacts and affects northern communities. I view this as an infrastructure-based program, even though a lot of people won't view it as infrastructure. But it is infrastructure for our mining industry. It's infrastructure for our resource-based industries, and we have to renew this with its funding. So a bit of an update and committee's indulgence on a review of the geomapping for energy and minerals.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question, and I would just say that if, given the technical and precise questions offered by my colleague on forestry as his first time out, I'm going to have to brace myself for further questions because I thought that was pretty detailed and impressive. But on the geomapping in particular, for Energy Minerals program, as you know, this was launched in 2008. It was as part of a 5-year initiative, produce new publicly available regional scale geoscience knowledge in Canada. In 2014, specifically, the Geomapping for Energy and Minerals program launched its new research program with 14 activities that were initiated following extensive consultations with our provincial and territorial counterparts. The program also engaged, as it should, Northerners and their institutions to seek input on how the program's research activities can most benefit Northerners. I can tell you that the long-term expected outcome of the geomapping for energy and minerals program is a strong, contributing to a strong northern economy through stable long-term investments in responsible resource development. But importantly, producing the kind of information that supports increased exploration and new mineral and energy resource opportunities and a better understanding of what that really means. So this is going to contribute, obviously, in our view, significantly to communities, Northerners, making informed decisions about their land, and the future in terms of their economy, and as is often the case, how resource projects can develop responsibly for their economic benefit without any compromise to the safety and the environmental issues or challenges that any given project imposes.
And one final question. You noted in your remarks about an extra $6.5 million for the National Energy Board. Mm-hmm. I know there's been other questions around this table about pipelines and NEB deeply involved in that. So can you go into a bit more detail about the $6.5 million in the SUPs here? Yeah. What's it being spent for, how it directly impacts, affects, and assists Canadians?
Yeah, specifically the increase of $6.5 million is primarily due to its review of TransCanada's Energy East Pipeline and Imperial Deepwater Offshore well applications. I think I mentioned at least one or both. Because safety and environmental protection go to the core of what the National Energy Board's priorities are. This is about providing safety information and, equally important, compliance and enforcement actions, which, again, is why I may have taken some exception to a previous question that I think may have overlooked the new tools that the National Energy Board has for compliance and enforcement, in some instances doubling of fines. And of course, I will never miss an opportunity to talk about the important work that the National Energy Board does in its full-scale review of a given project, and that its success is manifest in the fact that there are at least 72,000 kilometers of federally regulated pipeline, of which Canada has a 99.999% safety record. So we believe that in the exercise of building public confidence, our responsibility, whether it's pipeline safety, pipeline regime, legislative framework, it should focus on safety, prevention, preparedness, and response. And of course, a world-class, if not world-leading, liability regime is an important part of giving Canadians the confidence that these pipelines projects should proceed. And we know, at least here in North America, that a majority of folks appear to understand that and support it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Trost. Thank you to all members for your questions to the Minister today. And thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation, for the answers to the questions, and for taking the time to schedule this so soon after the request came in. So we will suspend the meeting for a couple of minutes as we change witnesses, have departmental officials come, well, in one case the same, but departmental officials come before a committee for about 55 minutes of additional time with them. We resume the meeting with witnesses from the Department of Natural Resources. We have with us remaining or staying at the table, Bob Hamilton, Deputy Minister. Welcome again. And as well with him, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Services Sector, Cami Ramcharan, and welcome again. We've had you before at this committee and very much look forward to your answers to questions. I would assume you don't have a presentation to make. You're just ready to get started with questions. So we will start with a 7-minute round with Ms. Crockett, followed by Ms. Charlton, and possibly with their time split, and Mr. Regan. So go ahead, please, Ms. Crockett, up to 7 minutes.
Thank you very much to our officials for coming in and answering the questions. I think a lot of Canadians don't understand that when we have estimates like this, that we do get a chance to break them down, and that you do come and appear before us to answer questions about that so that we can have more detailed understanding. So I appreciate that you make yourselves available for that. So thank you. And there were several things that I thought were quite fascinating in what we just heard from the minister's testimony. One is that Natural Resources is the largest employer of Aboriginals in the country, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, and that that's one of the areas that you're moving forward with the response to the AFIRD report. But I wanted to talk about the safety and environmental protection, compliance, and enforcement role, and how that's being enhanced here with the estimates that we have before us. Because I think, for example, in my riding of Calgary Centre, many people work in the oil and gas industry, but they also consider themselves environmentalists. They live within sight of the first oldest natural Canadian park, national park, the Banff National Park. They spend their weekends out in the mountains, and the environment's incredibly important, and they want to be assured that our energy products can be transported safely across the country. So I'd like to know, in the estimates, can you share with us what the government's plan is for responsible resource development, and inform us what actions are we taking to ensure that we have a world-class safety system? And I'd like you to talk about marine, rail, and pipeline transportation, please.
Go ahead, please, Mr. Hamilton.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I should just say, in addition to Cami, I do have other officials here with me that if we get into detailed questions, I'd like the ability to call them to the table if they can provide more detailed answers. On the question of safety, it definitely has been an issue of increased activity for the government. The issue that the minister raised is public confidence. How do we make sure that we can have projects go forward in a way that the public has confidence that they'll be done environmentally safely with respective communities? I'm not aware of anything in particular in the supplementary estimates that's directly on point to that. There are issues of increasing our consultation on the West Coast with Aboriginal communities to get the message across and to make sure we're having those dialogues. But I would say if you look outside of the estimates, there definitely have been a number of changes recently in all of the areas that you've suggested. In the area of tanker safety, where the
the government introduced a number of measures such as mandatory double hulling and additional research on the properties of bitumen in the event of a spill. So there have been some work on enhancing tanker safety, and in all of these areas, an effort to prevent what's happening, but also to make sure that we're prepared in the event that the unfortunate event happens. So tanker safety, pipeline safety, again, we will be coming forward with legislation primarily ensuring an adequate liability regime to make sure that liabilities are established in the event of a spill, and that the polluter pay principle is respected and enshrined in law. Rail safety, again, there have been a number of measures put forward in response to events to make sure that we have a safe rail system for transport as more of these products are transported by rail. So those are initiatives that have taken place not necessarily in the context of the supplementary estimates, but in recent history, and it's part of the really ongoing efforts that we have at the federal and the provincial level to try to ensure that resources can be shipped safely and with the confidence of Canadians.
So maybe if I could just turn your attention to the estimates indicate that there's 0.4 million, a relatively small amount, but Vote 5 capital from National Defence to Natural Resources, and this is to support the Canadian Safety and Security Program. Now, it's my understanding that this is providing funds that are science and technology funds that are going to support and advance and respond to our public safety and security policy initiatives. Can you elaborate on what this money is going to be spent for?
Yes, this is a transfer of $400,000 from National Defence to us, which delivers science and technology solutions through the Canadian Safety and Security Program, as you pointed out, support and advice to respond to the Government of Canada's public safety and security policy imperatives. So a bit different in content than the measures that I outlined earlier, but it is there. This Canadian Safety and Security Program is led by Defence and Research Development Canada's Centre for Security Science, and it has a mandate to fund projects in science and technology that will support Canada's public safety and security policy needs. We provide mobile radiation sensing and mapping capabilities as part of the Government of Canada's response in the event of a nuclear or radiological emergency. So that's the essence of this program, and you're right, it is part of the estimates are $400,000.
Okay. Now, maybe if I could just go over to the Major Projects Management Office. One of our priorities is to involve Aboriginals more in the major projects in terms of jobs and in terms of involvement. And I wonder if you could talk about the Major Projects Management Office and how that will get Aboriginals more involved.
Yes, the Major Projects Office, which has been set up and is provided for additional funding here in the supplementary estimates, is really a reflection of the increased activity that we have on the West Coast with energy projects and the important role that First Nations communities play in the development of those projects. And the focal point for the activity of the office, as the Minister indicated, is to promote engagement and dialogue with Aboriginal communities. And frankly, the other way that we are going to do that is in partnership with the BC government. So as part of this, there will actually be a tripartite forum of federal government, provincial government, and First Nations to try to talk through some of the implications of these project developments going forward. One of the specific things that I would point to, in addition to this general dialogue, there is an effort to try to uncover better the cumulative impacts of studies, and that's something that my colleagues over at Environment Canada are looking at in this context. Again, together with Aboriginal communities, how do we, and the province, how do we sort through the questions of not just looking at projects from a project-by-project basis, but the cumulative impacts of a number of projects. And that's an area that, frankly, in the environmental assessment regime, when you look worldwide, I think countries are grappling with how to do this well. And so we in Canada are as well trying to figure out better ways to do this. And part of the MPMO West activity will be to engage with First Nations in the province to try to do that. So I think in general, I would say the comment is the objective is to try to have a better dialogue with First Nations, with the province, about these projects, and to engage earlier and engage more often and better, and build that trust and dialogue together as the projects go forward. So that's the thrust of what we're trying to do with MPMO West.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Crockett. We go now to Ms. Charlton, up to 7 minutes. If you'd like to split your time, go ahead and do so at any time throughout your questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'll just ask one very quick question and then turn the rest of my time over to Monsieur Genet-Jourdain. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here and being on the hot seats now that the minister has left. I just have one really quick question. You were probably aware that earlier today there was a news report out of New Brunswick, a CBC article actually, that reports that the NEB chair and CEO, Peter Watson, does not think looking after environmental problems is the board's job. He said that taking care of the environment is up to the provinces and TransCanada. So I'm just wondering whether you agree with the suggestion that protecting the environment should not be a focus of the NEB's work.
Okay. Without having seen what has been reported to be said, I guess I was a bit too focused on preparing for today's event. What I can say about the NEB, they do look at projects that are put forward, whether it's the pipelines that we've talked a little bit about today, and look at the implications of those projects for a variety of factors, including the environment. And I know that from my experience at Environment Canada, we would be contributing to an NEB assessment of a project to see if what our sense was the implications for species at risk or what have you. It is true that there are other avenues to look at environmental impacts in government, other regulatory bodies and activities, but I can say that as part of the NEB assessment, whatever project they're looking at, it could be Energy East or Northern Gateway, they do look at the implications of that project for the community and the environment.
So you do look at it a bit differently than the CEO. Thanks very much.
Well, without having seen his comments, I can tell you what I'm saying.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Bon début de journée.
Good morning, or good beginning of your day. In his opening remarks, the minister mentioned that in Canada, no project is authorized unless there is an underpinning of an exhaustive study of its impact on the environment and the safety of Canada's. You have said, and the minister said, that we have redoubled our efforts in Canada to have a world-caliber marine organization. In terms of the Mini Arnaud project, which is something that is very much of interest to my constituents, do you think that there will be a detailed characterization of the effect on the Sept-Îles Bay because of the millions of tons of waste that will be there? There will be the extractive industry will be having a negative effect on the health of the people there and also the area. I am not terribly familiar with this project. Perhaps one of my colleagues would be able to better answer your question. But in any case, I will seek out the details, and I will be able to answer your question. I will send that information to the committee, but I'm not very sure about the process that would be followed by this project. Can I have your answer in writing? Certainly. Another question, a very quick one. You were talking about First Nations consultation. What amount of money, what funding is invested in this type of consultation with the First Nations? You know, under the Indian Act, there is no competency, no jurisdiction in terms of natural resources on Aboriginal lands. Therefore, the government has to turn to the members of the Aboriginal nations to proceed. So what is being done with Aboriginal people to proceed with the extractive industry in that area? Well, I would say there are two parts in answering your question. In the estimates that we have here before us for the major projects management office west, it is there to engage Aboriginal peoples, and also there is the aspect of land claims. But the second part is more general in nature. There are many activities, many resources in the department, in NRCan, in Environment Canada, Fisheries and Oceans as well, where people spend quite a bit of time engaging the First Nations about certain projects and reassuring them and everyone about the impact that will occur. So a great deal is being done in all of these departments. One party may provide some estimates, but and these estimates reflect it here, but it is much larger, much broader, because there is an involvement with the First Nations. It's very important for all implications to be understood by the government, by the First Nations, and by other communities as well. How much more time do I have? 1 minute? I'll give the floor then to my colleague. Oh, no? Let me now come back to Emmett Natwana.
Je vais revenir sur la distinction
to the distinction between consulting the elected persons, and from my perspective and the Aboriginal perspective, and this is what we learn from history, very often the government will look only at the 9 elected or the newly elected people under the terms of the Indian Act. This is a problem in 2014, and effort must be made to provide research to be able to get the consensus of the people, not just the elected representatives. It has to be for the overall good of the people and their consensus.
We have no time for a response really to that. Mr. Regan, go ahead, up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses for staying around. Let me first ask a question about the National Energy Board and the $6.5 million that has been assigned for, I guess, the assessment of the Energy East pipeline, as well as the Shell Deepwater well proposed. So if I understand it, NRCan spends that money in advance and recovers it from the. I mean, the minister mentioned that that's recovered from the industry. Why do you have to spend it in advance? How does that work?
The process that the NEB follows is it seeks funding through supplementary estimates or estimates, and then for the most part, there may be some exceptions to this, but for the most part, they're able to then recover that expenditure from the industry. So it's like a cost recovery program, but we first have to come and get the authority to spend the money from Parliament. It's just the way it works. But in almost all cases, I just hesitate to say all, just in case there's an exception, they then do go and cost recover that money from the industry.
Merci. Pour retenir pour le moment au sujet que j'ai parlé.
Just to return to the subject that I broached earlier with the minister, what are the plans that you have in your department? Emergency, contingency planning, if there were another national crisis, international supply crisis. A supply crisis.
Isotopes. Yeah.
How is it funded? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
And how is it funded? If you have do you have a backup plan, and how is it funded?
Yes, well, I would say the plan on the isotopes, as the minister indicated, is to seek out alternate supplies. And I think when the decision was made in 2010, there was a decision made that we would try to rely more on other sources besides the NRU. And indeed, I think the minister referenced some of the activity that we're doing on that front.
But it sounds as if that basically there's a hope that at the time, if another crisis comes along, that by then there'll be other sources that produce enough that it won't be an issue. Is that basically where it stands?
No, there's more than a hope. If you look at the figures, and I'm just going to look for them in front of me. I know I have them here. There's actually been quite a movement in terms of more diversity of supply since that time. And here I have the figures. So if you look at 2010, before that time, the NRU produced over 40% of the global supply of isotopes. And today, they supply between 15 and 20%, depending on when exactly you measure it. So we've seen a decreased reliance on the NRU, but certainly they are a contributor. And the plan is really to try to make sure that there are those other sources available when the NRU ceases to produce medical isotopes.
Let me turn, if I may, to AECL.
Okay.
And as I understand it, the government, SNC-Lavalin, paid $15 million, I think, for the AECL assets. We've just seen that the government's now paying another $35 million for Bruce Power's refurbishment for some reason, which we're not going to be privy to, apparently. You also, of course, get royalties from China, or revenue, the revenue that's coming back from China from royalties from CANDU. Is that included in the SUP-Bs, and how much is that, and where would we see that?
Not included in the SUP-B that I'm aware of, unless it's buried somewhere, but I don't believe so. But I can, again, with some of the other information that you talked about can do, that financial info, I'm happy to provide that in writing afterward. I just don't have it at my disposal. And there's not anything in the SUP-B on that royalty question.
Okay. The minister said the department plans to go out over the next number of months to Aboriginal communities to talk about the new extractive sector transparency provisions in Bill C-43. Now, I assume if this is a serious undertaking and a, quote, comprehensive engagement, unquote, with First Nation communities, that it will require adequate funding. So exactly how much is budgeted, whether it's in the main estimates of SUP-As or SUP-Bs, for these consultations?
In this area, you're right that mandatory reporting initiative is going forward, and we have deferred the implementation for First Nations for 2 years, and there will be further consultations. And I would emphasize it's further consultations. There already have been discussions about this initiative and how it would apply to all levels of government, including First Nations. From my perspective, I'm looking at we're going to be doing this as part of our ongoing activity funding, so we will fund that internally within the department. We're not seeking any extra funds in this initiative that I'm aware of. I'll look to Cami.
But are you able to tell us, for example, what is budgeted for that? I mean, you must have a budget within your department that you say, okay, we're going to spend this much on these consultations.
Yeah, and again, not having broken it out for this session, if I can come up with such a figure, if I go back to the office, I'm happy to provide it to you, but I will just say we're not seeking additional funding for that here. We will be covering that through our ongoing efforts.
From what we've heard previously, the process with the Aboriginal communities is to, quote, inform them how this will work, unquote. I guess the question is, why are you simply telling Aboriginal communities how the new provisions are going to apply to them, rather than actually consulting them on what those provisions should look like?
Well, in all of these discussions, there's an aspect of explaining how it will work, for sure, just to make sure that everybody understands. But I would also say that in the context of these discussions, there can be points raised about how it might have an unintended consequence that can be dealt with outside of the legislative framework. There's always some details that are important to know for us and for the Aboriginal community or whoever we're talking to. So I think it would be extreme to call it just telling people how it works. It is true that there will be a legislative framework that we will be describing rather than changing, but always through these discussions there is an opportunity to uncover perhaps some details that could be dealt with outside of that context. So yes, an explanation part, but also listening to understand to make sure we understand how it's going to operate and the implications.
Okay, so Mr. Deputy Minister, I didn't hear you say that in fact you had told them in advance. It doesn't suggest that, and in fact in view of that, I guess it's no wonder that Aboriginal groups have been talking to my office, have been viewing this as pretty much a punitive measure. What resources will be provided to Aboriginal communities to allow them to meet the new requirements under Division 28 of Bill C-43?
Need a very brief response, please.
Yes, and just two things. I would say there had been discussions with the First Nations prior to tabling the bill, so just to correct the record on that front. And I'm not aware of any specific funding that has been earmarked for that activity. If I uncover it, I'll let you know, but for the moment, we will engage in these consultations and we'll see what resource implications fall out of that for us and for the communities.
Thank you, Mr. Regan. We go now to the 5-minute round, starting with Ms. Block, then going to Mr. Trost and Ms. Duncan, possibly Mr. Leaf. I want to remind the committee that we will have to go to the votes after so we can vote on the supplementary B estimates and report them to the House. So we go now to Ms. Block, pardon me, up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to our officials to this committee. I had the privilege of serving on the Government Operations and Estimates Committee, and I know one of my colleagues along the way did too. And I feel that it was an important committee to sit on as you gain a fairly good understanding of the whole budgeting process and why it's important for committees to look at the supplementary estimates and ask questions not only of the minister but of the department. I won't, even though I sat on that committee for 2 years and we studied how to improve the process and the information that MPs received, I still look at these estimates and sometimes am confused by what I'm looking at. And so what I am wanting to have you clarify for me is the transfers to other organizations. And I know there's transfers that can come from organizations and then go to organizations, and that sometimes they're the same, that we could have something coming in from Aboriginal Affairs and perhaps going out, and that may not be the best example. But I'm specifically looking at the transfer to Shared Services Canada to provide support to departmental staff located at missions abroad. And I'm curious to know what's that for?
Okay, well, maybe on that one I might ask Cami to elaborate on it, but I think that you're right. Sometimes it's difficult to find your way through somehow the supplementary estimates fit in with the broader estimates process and broader budgeting. But in general, we do identify a number of areas where we've talked about Aboriginal affairs, national defense, where one department is providing a service, if you like, for another. In the case of the High Arctic, we have a facility and we're saying it makes more sense, more efficient for us to do that, and rather than for Department of Defense, for example, to recreate it. And so we would accept a transfer from them for that. On the shared services one, maybe I'll just ask Cami to
go ahead,
elaborate.
Mr. Amtran.
Thank you. So primarily the transfer is about providing support to our technical advisors that are located in Abu Dhabi and Beijing in order to undertake market development initiatives. Shared Services Canada is a different department than ours, but they are the ones that technically provide that support. So we provide resources to them in order to support us in those two locations. We basically have one locally engaged staff that's in Beijing, and we also have one that's in Abu Dhabi, and they're frontline contact staff for our natural resources engagement in Beijing and in the Middle East, and they help support us in our international priorities in key emerging markets for Canada.
Okay. I will follow up, noting that in this line, in the budget, or in the estimates, it says that money has been transferred to Shared Services Canada from National Defence, from Natural Resources, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I know you can't answer anything on behalf of those departments, but what kind of collaboration or work happens between departments in order to, or I should ask, is there any collaboration or discussions between departments when you're looking at providing resources to another department so that you're aware of what other departments are perhaps supporting at the same time that this department would be?
That's really hard to know for certain because we're not involved in terms of the other organizations and what they're doing. However, there will be times where we're all collaborating on the same kind of project so that we will have portions in terms of supporting folks abroad. So specifically to your question on the various other departments and what they're providing funding to Shared Services Canada, it could be in support of the same organization that we are, or it could be fundamentally different. It's just that it's about recognizing that departments are transferring money to another department, and that's what the estimates are doing, is showing that money is moving from one budget within our department or another department back into Shared Services Canada, and not necessarily is it always linked.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Block. We go now to Mr. Trost for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a follow-up on a question that was worked in there a little bit earlier. It concerns the $2.5 million increase in Vote 1 operating for Aboriginal participation in West Coast energy development. Now, because we're dealing directly with the SUPs, my question has to be directly about the $2.5 million. So, interested in how that is being directly spent and examples. But I'm not just interested in the $2.5 million. I'm interested in the overall program and what $2.5 million is being put into that. So as much as numbers are what we're talking about today, could you give me as concrete an example as possible as to what the government, what Natural Resources Canada is spending for facilitation of Aboriginal participation in West Coast energy development? Something, and as I tell people always remember stories better than numbers. I love numbers. I've got degrees in geophysics and economics, so I enjoy numbers. But as much as working in the numbers here about the $2.5 million increase, give us as much as you can the story behind what we're spending here.
Sure. Happy to do that. And I think the Minister alluded to some of this in his comments, but I'll be as concrete as I can be. One caveat up front, it is something that we're just starting up. We just formed the office and it's out moving, so I think over time we'll see many more concrete results than what we've had up till now, but I'll tell you what we've done out of the starting block. First off, we did name a senior official out there to head up the office whose primary job is really to make sure that we are having good engagement and dialogue with First Nations and with the provincial government in BC on projects that are at play. And as you know, there's a number of them out there, whether it's liquefied natural gas projects that proponents are coming forward with, whether it's pipelines. There is actually quite a bit of activity on the West Coast, and a lot of that activity directly implicates First Nations, whether they're on the route of a pipeline or they're located near where an LNG terminal is going to be located, or they're near where a gas discovery is going to be made. There's a lot of interest and concern of First Nations on this development. And I would say job number one for this office and for that person, Mike Henderson, who's heading it up, is to make sure that we're engaging with First Nations early on in the process and having a good dialogue outside of the formal environmental assessment process. There's always an opportunity for communities and people to be engaged through the formal mechanism, but what this office is trying to do is to set up a mechanism whereby we can have those exchanges and learn from each other outside of that process. Two tangible things that I would say is we have started up, although it's not off and running yet, a tripartite process to look at a range of issues. And that's tripartite with the First Nation, with the province, and with ourselves. Because one of the issues that we can run into is when a project comes forward, there's different dialogues going on with different entities. And so we've tried to pull them together, get us all around the table so that we can understand the implications of a project, talk through some of the issues, and see what some of the solutions might be. That's one. The second one that I mentioned, which again will be part of this tripartite process, is really a study at this moment to figure out how we best assess cumulative impacts of projects. That's one of the things that's been of interest to First Nations in a number of projects, and we need to work together with our provincial colleagues and federally ourselves and with the First Nations to figure out how do we assess that, how do we take that, how do we gather that information. A lot of this is monitoring baseline information. How do we effectively gather that so that it can inform future projects going forward? So those would be two few of the sort of more concrete things that we're working on, in addition to just generally being present, making sure that we're having discussions that people want to have on these projects and facilitating that so that everybody feels a little more like a partner in the project.
Now you said, and I thank you for elaborating. I know some of this has been asked before, but for elaborating on that. You said you're relatively new yet in this process. So is it very possible that in future SUPs, et cetera, going forward, one, we're going to see more increases for funding, because if the demand is extraordinarily more than budgeted, I mean, the reason we do SUPs is for more funding, so I'm asking a hypothetical, I know. So one, is it a possibility this could escalate considerably more dramatically? And two, I also see here a $200,000 for comprehensive claims and self-government negotiations. So putting that together, are a lot of the consultations being tied in together? Because these seem to be related items. I could see why they might be separate budgetary. But I can also see how there's going to be a linkage between these expenditures. So how close is the linkage between these expenditures like this? And how clear is the guidance for future escalation in spending in this area?
So,
Deputy Minister, could you keep the answer very brief, please?
Sure. So if I take the second part first, they are two distinct aspects in the sense, in the second, the land claims, we're providing technical advice on forestry or land surveys, et cetera. So it's technical advice into a bigger process. But you're right, obviously there's some commonality between the two. But I do think it's fair to say they're separate, even beyond the purposes of the supplementary estimates. Hard to answer the hypothetical question on future increases. At the moment, there's no plan to augment this activity. As we go through it, we may uncover some things that we'd like to do more of, spend more money on, and at that point, we'll have a decision to make as to whether we do that extra activity and take away from something else we're doing within the department or somewhere else in government, or do we come back and try to access additional funds. The only sort of small caveat I'd put on that is that part of the effort we're looking at in the cumulative impacts is monitoring. And this is an area where I think there really is an opportunity for us to do a better job of monitoring and to engage First Nations more actively in that monitoring effort. And depending upon how that goes, it is a potential area where we could want to spend a bit more money, but again, at that point, we'd have to weigh off, do we ask for more, or do we take it from something else that we're doing? So, but otherwise, no plans at the moment for increased expenditures.
Yes, thank you for that explanation, and thank you, Mr. Trost. Just before we continue with questioning, I just want to get a sense from the committee how much time you think it'll take to go through the votes on the supplementary estimates. You're aware of the process. It can be very, very quick, or it can take some time. Do we need the 15 minutes that are remaining, or can we do it in less time than that? 5 minutes? Okay. We'll go ahead in that fashion. Usually it doesn't take that long. Go ahead, please, Ms. Duncan, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I would just like to again get on the agenda that we've made a number of requests both to the Minister and to the Department for providing information. We hope that we all receive it. And my request wasn't a breakdown on the MPMO for BC. I noticed in the information, Mr. Deputy, that was provided initially on the new MPMO in Vancouver, is that initially it says it's for BC and Alberta, and then it sort of shifts over to just talking about meeting BC interests and issues. One of the major project areas in energy and resources that is completely missing from the agenda in federal intervention is the rail shipping, increasing thousand-fold rail shipping of bitumen and other petroleum products. And there was a recent issue in Alberta where essentially we have this legal fiction. The bitumen from the oil sands was being exported partly by pipeline to north of Edmonton and then by rail to the United States. And so the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation asked that there be a National Energy Board review because it was an export of a petroleum product. And they were told, no, it doesn't classify as an NEB project. So I wonder if you could speak to that. Increasing amount of the product is being shipped by rail will probably continue to because there'll be long-term contracts we can anticipate. Is the government starting to reconsider the mandate for the National Energy Board and to include the review of rail shipment, including for export of petroleum products?
Mr. Hamilton, I don't know if you can answer that question, but answer the part that you feel free to answer. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, there's two questions there, and I think that you're right to point out the BC and Alberta. I've tended, at least in my remarks, to focus on BC, but the initiative is covered both BC and Alberta, so I guess it's just a reflection of the activity that's there, that in using examples I've tended to point to just BC. So that's a fair point on the first question. On the second, we have seen an increase in activity in shipping by rail for a variety of reasons. Indeed, the U.S. representatives were here providing some information on their quadrennial energy review, and just looking at the amount of rail shipments and how they've increased over time. It's quite a different map that you've had, say, 5 years ago from what you see now in terms of the number of shipments. And so it's of interest, and that's led to some changes, or has been helped by some changes in rail safety initiatives that the government has put forward. I'm not aware of the NEB comment that you made, and nor at this time can I comment on whether there's any government initiative or intention to change the NEB's mandate. There are none that I'm aware of, and I wouldn't comment on that. But I would, just make you support your point that we are seeing an increase in activity on this front, and it's something that we're paying attention to.
Okay, thanks. In follow-up to that, there was a similar concern. The Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation actually pulled out of that Alberta hearing because they were given less than 24 hours to review the environmental impacts of that pipeline, which raises the concern that as the federal government has unilateral responsibility for First Nations, they in fact are not being supported by Natural Resources or Environment Canada in reviewing environmental impacts of major resource projects. My final question to you is about energy efficiency. I noted to the Minister that I follow the work of the U.S.-Canada Clean Energy Dialogue, and I noted that there were considerable participation by the officials in seminars in the U.S. on energy efficiency. No doubt you are aware, your head of your energy efficiency office has probably reported to you the report that we did 2 years ago, Government Operations Committee, recommending substantially increased investments by the federal government in energy efficiency to save hundreds of millions of dollars down the road to taxpayers. So I guess my question to you is, I find it puzzling that we're not seeing substantial increases in the SUPs or in the budgets towards that objective of saving money for taxpayers by upfront investments in energy efficiency. And are you considering the U.S. model, which is binding directives on federal departments to invest in energy efficiency and reduced water use?
A couple of comments. On energy efficiency, we certainly would agree that it's important for a variety of reasons to be as energy efficient as we possibly can. It has certainly environmental benefits, and it has actually economic benefits as well to be trying to be as efficient with the energy that we use. I would caution, though, just because there's nothing in the SUPS B estimate or nothing substantive, you can't ignore the fact that there is actually a lot of funding that goes into energy efficiency initiatives. Indeed, in 2011, the Eco Energy Efficiency program was funded to the tune of, I believe it's $190 million over 5 years. And the objective of providing that funding was for the purpose of trying to increase energy efficiency, whether it's in buildings, houses. That was the funding that the government has used in that vein. That was 5-year funding, which would be coming up for renewal, and there'll be another opportunity to assess whether to spend that money, how to spend that money. But certainly there's a big part of our activity that we are engaged in NRCan, which is trying to fund technological advances and other avenues for getting greater energy efficiency. And I think in terms of results, one study that I saw looked at Canada and said we're actually the second leading country in terms of energy efficiency improvements over the last number of years. Now, we've got a ways to go. I'm not declaring success, but it does indicate that in recent years we have made some efforts to improve our energy efficiency.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Duncan. Mr. Leaf, I hope you're not heartbroken. You have about 3 minutes instead of the 5, so go ahead, please, sir.
I know. I was going to say that's a full minute more than you've ever given me before, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. Today,
you're out of time, Mr. Leaf.
Boy, does that go fast! Time flies. I noticed in the minister's opening remarks, the one part I didn't get to while he was here was the $2.1 million that's gone from national defense to national natural resources for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the Natural Resource Resolute facility and the logistics there to support the Canadian Forces Arctic Training Center. I'm just wondering if you can touch on that portion of the Vote 1 operating line.
Sure. The $2.1 million?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's... that is really an effort, I think, for us to gain greater efficiencies in government, that we have the Resolute facility, and there's an opportunity for us to use that facility for national defense to carry on some of their activities, rather than, I think, as I mentioned earlier, for national defense to construct a whole separate facility and engage in all of those activities. There's an economy of scale of them using ours, and we've struck an arrangement with them whereby they will transfer to us the costs of using our facility. And again, I think if you look at it from an overall government perspective, it's greater efficiency for sure. And they're happy with the deal, and we're happy to receive the transfer for that to make greater use of that facility. And hopefully we're seeing more and more of that in government as a way to try to find some efficiencies where we can use a facility for more than one purpose and look at other parts of government that can benefit from that, and we can share in the expenses. So that's the purpose of that transfer. Excellent.
Well, it's good to see that calculation is being made in terms of where you can share existing resources for ultimate government efficiencies. And as you say, it'd be nice to know that that's going on right across government. And I think you should be congratulated for looking at measures like that on behalf of the Canadian taxpayer, to make sure that you're partnering well and breaking down some of those departmental silos and identifying opportunities where you can share these resources, particularly in the north, where the higher cost of development can be exacerbated by the challenges that exist there. And invariably, those partnerships will only strengthen other ways for you to innovate and create future cost savings for the Canadian taxpayer. So thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm sure I haven't expired my full 3 minutes, but that's all I needed.
Thank you for the filibuster, Mr. Leaf. No, thank you very much for your questions and comments, and thank you very much to our officials, those at the table and those behind. I do want to say that I think we in the House of Commons very much appreciate the professionalism and the good work done by all of you, and we do appreciate that very much. Don't say it very often. So thank you, and thank you for being here. But the committee members, we still have to deal with the votes on the Supplementary B estimates. So what we're dealing with is Supplementary Estimates B 2014-15, Vote 1B under Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, Vote 1B under National Energy Board, Votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under Natural Resources. So, shall 1B under Atomic Energy carry? On division. Shall 1B under National Energy Board carry? On division. Shall 5B under Natural Resources carry? On division. Shall 10B under Natural Resources carry? On division. Shall the Chair report 1B under Atomic Energy Board of Canada Limited, vote 1B under National Energy Board, votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under Natural Resources to the House? Yes. Yes, we shall proceed in that fashion then. And again, thank you so much to all members of the committee for your work today. And on Thursday, we will have a meeting on future business of the committee. So we can look mainly at the meetings from now till Christmas, but certainly beyond that as well. So if you'll come prepared on Thursday, we will do that and see what business this committee will work on in the weeks and months ahead. Meeting adjourned.